And here we are. Hi, my friends. Hi, Piotr.
Hello, buongiorno.
Buongiorno.
That was my best Italian accent I can produce.
It's excellent. It's excellent.
Yeah,
Piotr, thank you very much to be here with us. It's a real pleasure to have you here to have a talk like as usual with the front of a beer. We have done a lot of time some geek talks in front of a beer, but actually it's better in front of a coffee for this hour of the morning.
The conversation have less tendency to actually divert.
Exactly.
With coffee, we're more likely to stay on the topic.
You're right. Ciao Stefano.
Good morning, both guys.
Hi, Stefano.
Piotr, our Geek Talks are just a talk, a nerd talk, non-hardcore nerd talk with friends, talking about open source, nerd stuff, let me say. But the first topic, the fil rouge of the entire Geek Talk series is how open source changed our life. And let me say that your story is a long, it's a longer way from, it's a lot to say about open source and how open source changed your life, right? What do I have to say about this?
Wow.
But first of all, just a little bit about context. Can you please introduce yourself and tell what's your work, what you do?
So I guess this recording will last like 4 hours. No, but on the serious note, Gaetano and I, we've known each other for really many years. we both together work as Red Hat instructors and examiners. So we've been how long has it been? Like 16 years, 17 years?
I'm pretty sure I started in 2002, but I'm pretty sure to met you in 2003 or 2004.
I believe so. Yes. 2003 was my first year, so it's been 17 years already. So, well, our acquaintance is gonna be mature next year.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So it's been a while. So first of all, my name is Piotr Baranowski. I'm a Polish Red Hat instructor. Working for a company called OSAC, the local training partner and delivery partner in Poland. Delivering training since 2003, delivering exams, Red Hat certification exams since 2003 as well. 2003 was the year when I got my RHCE certification. And since then, I've been traveling the world delivering knowledge to students worldwide. And I think it's fair to say that I traveled the entire world delivering these trainings and exams. So for the last 17 years, I was pretty much doing only that. And it's a big topic. It's a big thing. It's not just Linux. There's a whole bunch of tools, a whole bunch of different projects and solutions that we used to work well with, and we teach this stuff. Making the world better one student at the time. So I'm the instructor, I'm the examiner, smart ass, trying to be the expert matter in all things open source. So yeah, that pretty much defines who I am.
Yeah, exactly. It's great. Let me say that your story as instructor, it's a milestone for all instructors in EMEA or all around the world, because you have done a lot of stuff, and not only delivery training, stuff like that, but just tell to the world how can be better with open source. This is the real point. And for this reason, we'll focus on the first point: how open source changed your life. First of all, just the name of your company. Tell about something open source, for example.
Right. So as you can see, it says OSAC here, and the name stands for Open Source Education Center. Okay, let me take the wire out of the picture. Open Source Education Center. And our punchline is let's make it better. It's a little winky joke. IT, let's make it better. So that was the idea behind the thing. So in 2009, late 2009, I decided to quit my old company that I used to work for many years before, and form a dedicated, business entity that will focus only on open source. Because before that, I used to work in a larger educational company that was delivering all sorts of trainings, covering different technologies. There were IBM mainframes, there were Sun Microsystems systems, Microsoft, and Novell, pretty much everything. It was like a go-to shop for all things IT related. And we felt that we are, initially in 2003, we were just a little tiny cog in this whole mechanism. And we decided that after business has developed to a substantial size, we decided that, hey, we can't be a part of the bigger team anymore. We're going to play on our own. And that's when OSEC was created. So it was a bold move because probably you all remember in 2009, the world crisis was at its full potential. So the problem was that, hey, shall we stay in the old company and just try to survive, or shall we go for a risky way and start our own business? And we did it. And guess what? 11 years later, we are still here and we're better than before. Of course, the COVID, it punches everybody hard in the gut, and it makes our life miserable. But I'm just giving you so addressing your original question, how did open source change my life? It actually makes my life bearable right now in those hard times of crisis. A lot of my friends, they have to shut down their businesses, they have to shut down their companies, and they're struggling to make money. We are delivering a lot of trainings all the times, mostly because people are at home. We have virtual platforms, we can do things remotely. So for me, from the instructor perspective, nothing really changed. Well, except for I don't have to spend my life on the airports
exactly.
and have hotel lounges. I've actually my sleeping room is exactly 4 meters away from here when I'm working. This is my office. So being the open source instructor under current conditions is a very, very comfortable position. Okay. So that's one of the unexpected outcomes of being the open source instructor. That's absolutely mind-blowing. And on one hand, I really envy myself. I say, well, man, I'm lucky. Looking at all those people around me, getting in trouble, it is wonderful. And I believe it's pretty much the same story for you. You also deliver trainings like crazy. And I believe the last quarter was really great for all of us.
Yes.
We should be all humble, but I gotta tell you, the last quarter was really amazing. Don't get me wrong, of course.
No.
I understand the gravity of the situation as we're in here, but it was really cool. So now getting back to the original question, how did it change my life? I would say that it defines my life. It didn't change it really, because when I started doing all this stuff, I was 20? I was 21, I had milk under my nose still. I was just a big toddler trying to find my own way in a huge, corporate world and trying to understand how things operate. And by that time, when I started, the Novell was the king of the road, the king of the hill, and Sun Microsystems was the god of all Unix systems and everything else. And we were trying to find our place in the universe. And I still remember in very early 2003, I met with my colleague and our director, and I said our manager, and we had this conversation. Hey, shall we try to get in talks with this company called Red Hat and maybe bring them into Polish market? And the guy said, by the time my manager was working with lots of different, vendors. So for him, getting another one into equation didn't change anything. But he said, you know what? You are crazy people. I'm going to trust you. Let's try to do that. Ta-da! There we are.
Best choice ever.
Best choice ever, absolutely. And since then, I'm living, I'm breathing, I'm operating open source since that. Since that time, I use it, I work with it, I deliver it, I manage it, I tell people to use it, I work as the ambassador. So your question is, how did open source change my life? It didn't. It defined who I am today. It defines my principles, and I believe that it pretty much works the same for you. For me, open is the only way to do.
Exactly.
Okay, it's not like I changed from being a former Microsoft or Sun Microsystems, fanboy that changed into open source guy. I started as open source guy, so for me, it's like it's in my DNA. So yeah, I am the open source guy. You can definitely say that. That pretty much is. But just to put the things in perspective, the house that I built last year, the house that I'm actually living in right now, it was built because I am doing my open source work. Exactly. So I can say that my house was built on the foundations of being the open source guy and doing my stuff around the world. So do I love it? Yes, absolutely. Would I do it again? Twice if I could have the option to do it. So I believe that's the answer to your question.
I think so.
Wow, your picture was extremely clear, incredible, and thank you very much for sharing in this way, because it's the right way. And let me say, you say something more, that also that the open source is something that help is the way for us to change the world. Changing the world. And this is another point, because it's important to build our house, our home, and based on what we have created thanks to the open source. First of all, we have created our professionalism. We are a professional, a professional that recognized in the market thanks to the open source. And let me say that 25 years ago, this kind of professionalism was absolutely unbelievable. It is not believable that you can create such as this kind of level of professionalism based on open source. 25 years ago, we have to think about closed platform, closed source stuff like Oracle, Microsoft, Sun, stuff like that. And this was a great way to create something. And
I think you can easily say that we are self-defined experts, because we brought our domain into the market. We created it, and now we became the experts in it. So it's like, it's a chicken and egg problem. We became the source of the problem, and now we're the solution as well.
Incredible.
So we created ourselves. That's right. That's correct.
And let me say something more. We say that we are changing the world through the open source, and the world is changing in a way, it's an incredible way, thanks to technology that is really useful, not only for technicians, not only for nerds, but for everyone. Because let me say that when everyone use our internet connection, or IoT stuff like AC or wherever in your house, domotic stuff, you are using open source software. But you are using open source software also when you drive a car with self-driving assistance. You are using open source when you are using a cloud stuff, social media, for example, or wherever. Everything started from open source, and everything there is no cloud as we know today without open source and without community. This is another important point and changed the entire way of the entire world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So when I'm delivering some presentations, I have this one particular point in my presentations that I repeat every single time, is that open source is not just about the source code. It's not just about the technology. It's about liberation of thoughts that can be coined, that can be turned into ideas, that can be turned into projects. Now, I'm having this one particular beautiful example. We all know Raspberry Pi, right? And we all know Arduino. So there is a project that was created by a hairdresser from Los Angeles. And that lady, she went online, she took a couple of Arduino courses. Now, she's a hairdresser, she's not a technical person. She took a couple of courses in Arduino programming and wiring, capacitors and resistors and everything else. And she built herself a cat feeding platform. So basically, it's an automatic cat feeder because she had 2 cats and she wanted she wanted the cats to be fed automatically. Now, if you were to tell me the same thing 20 years ago, I would smack you in the face and say, shut up, this is bullshit. Now, in 2000, I believe it was like 2017, she created that thing and she went online with this idea. And I believe afterwards she went with Indiegogo or Kickstarter, and she has a product now. The beauty of that thing is it's not that the woman is brilliant. Of course, she's smart, but that's not the point. 30 years ago, in order to build something, you had to be really, really brilliant. You had to study like half of your life. Today, you can just come up with this stupid, dumb-ass idea that says, hey, how about we create a cat feeder? And then just start poking around with different technologies which are open. Sorry, air quotes are not necessary. They are actually open. You can read the documentation. You can connect the dots yourself and say, hey, what if I plug that thing in here? Is this going to work? Oh, the light went on. Well, how about I connect it? And step by step, you get to the point when you have your freaking cat feeder.
Yeah,
and this is just one tiny example. I love it because, first of all, the lady in the example, she's completely an anonymous hairdresser from LA with absolutely no chance to change the world by being hairdresser. I'm sorry to say that, but there is no way that as somebody who is a hairdresser can change the life. But because she had a problem, she had a need, she was given the tools to do that, bang, you have it. That's one of the reasons why I love things like Lego Mindstorms, or basically, but because you take a kid's mind, and you tell the kid, hey, play with it. And after 6 hours, you come back to the room and the kid has a little rocket. It's like, what the hell happened here? Oh, I just connected things in an unusual way. So the world gets forward because we try to do stupid shit.
Yeah.
Right? That's true.
Totally.
Okay? Either we are having a war, which is a very extreme way of moving forward, but everybody will agree, every historian will tell you that our world has progressed because of the wars. War is a very, very intense way of progressing humanity forwards. We've had lots of collateral damage, but that's not the point. Now, we can do the same progress without collateral damage. We just let people do stupid shit. Yeah. And if we give them the tools, which pretty much give them unlimited way of how things can be done, that's beautiful. Of course, we're going to have millions of ideas that failed miserably, but out of all these ideas, we're going to have 1% that's brilliant. That's a replacement for shoe leashes, or wireless headphones, or a way of doing very crazy stuff. And all this is fueled by open source thinking, open thinking. not proprietary, not closed source, not undocumented and obscured, but openness makes this world open and better one step at a time. So that's what I feel that sitting in this bandwagon. This is a cool thing because we are a part of the human history cycle that is fastest progressing ever, and it speeds up exponentially. It's getting better and better.
Piotr, your story exudes passion everywhere. So, but I'm thinking about many people in your position that are running a business. A lot of them are often concerned.
We got a little bit frozen. And we're back.
So, Piotr, your story exudes passion everywhere. So, but many people, especially those in your position, so people that are running a business, are often concerned when the discussion goes about an open source only project or a business totally focused and tethered with open source. Mm-hmm. But you are telling us a different story, a story on which open source is not only sustainable, but is also a big opportunity for an entrepreneur like you. So how this sustainability of the open source has evolved over the years since it was just a geek passion. Now it can be can be a challenge, but it's also a very big, huge opportunity.
So, in a couple, we're looking at the time range of 20 years. So, within the last 20 years, a lot of things have changed. And if we take only the aspect of running business related to open source out of the equation, just take it, surgically. Let's cut it out. And let's think about open source businesses per se, only them. So the first thing that have changed is that we are no longer a passionate group of geeks, a basement nerds that are trying to run, their own little revolution. We are fathers. Some of us are already grandfathers, and we have businesses, we have houses, we have bank loans. So reality check is in effect right now. So you can't just leave your mother's house in your mother's house and just try to run a revolution without making money. We need to make money. That's the reality of the current world. It's been like this for the last couple of thousand years. So nothing is changing here. Now, what changed is that open source projects, they are still open. They still follow the principles of freedom, of openness, of transparency, but at the same time, they must make profit.
Definitely. So
here's when Peter that was 19 years old talks to a Peter who is 42 years old, and it's like father and son discussion. I'm talking to myself when I was at the age of me being my own son. So what has changed is that you need to generate profit. You need to earn money to do stuff, to put food in your plate and put some coffee in your cup. So we need professional services. That's certain. And if you have the skill set, like you're an enthusiast of some certain technology, you love it, you know it from top to bottom, you know the technology absolutely perfectly. There is going to be someone who needs your expertise. And I believe that majority of successful open source projects, they will need to turn into commercial products, which do not negate the original principles that follow the creation of the projects themselves. So you can have a cookie and eat the cookie. or eat a cake and have a cake, because you can run open source project that everyone can clone, that everyone can copy, and everyone can just fork and do their own modifications, but at the same time you can provide the professional services which can't be easily cloned. If you're an expert in your matter, you can't be easily cloned. It's not a matter of running a git clone and creating a fork of the source code. You still need people who know how this thing works. And I've been dealing with a lot of open source companies that turned into successful businesses. And there's plenty of them, okay? There are things like HA Proxy, there's a DRBD, there's a MariaDB, there's an Enterprise DB. There's a whole bunch of companies that used to be, well, open source projects run by nerds in basements. Nowadays, they are successful businesses. And the biggest fear that we all had was, unfortunately, was not the real threat. The fear was that once they turn into corporations, they're going to turn evil and they're going to go closed source. Thankfully, that didn't happen. So that's the biggest change. And
but let me say that even something or someone turns evil in the open source, there is always somebody that can fork and start back from
exactly
from the good point of view.
Couple of weeks ago, there was a good thing. What I'm gonna say is gonna be controversial, but I'm very well known for saying controversial stuff.
I think I can guess what you are going to say.
So a couple of weeks ago, a thing happened that most people are petrified of. Okay, they are scared shitless and, oh my God, what are they doing? The CentOS Stream project, right? You knew where it's coming to. So, first of all, it's not a debate of whether or not this move is a correct one. I have my opinion on that, but that's not the case here. The case is that just a couple of days after the announcement of CentOS 8 being no longer developed after 2021, a Rocky Linux was created, okay? I'm not saying that these guys are good or bad. That's not the point. My point is that they can do it.
Exactly.
And if they do it right, they're going to be successful. I always thought, I was repeated, that diversity is the best way towards development and improvement. So if somebody has, like imagine you're running a project and one day you decide to become a big, ugly, nasty corporation, you go with the closed source, there's going to be someone who says, no, I'm going to fork it, I'm going to start developing my own version, and I will follow the principles of open source. And guess what? It's the customers and the users who are voting. That's technocracy.
I think we have something like 3 upcoming CentOS alternatives now. Navy OS, Rocky, and the history learned that we can learn from history that when something are breaking the rules, then more powerful and better solutions are coming. So maybe
this is
that can be a turning point for enterprise open source.
So now you touched a very good subject. It's called genetics. Okay, evolution and genetics. Well, of course, we say that there's Darwin's theory of evolution. The thing is that with Linux distributions, we have pretty much the same mechanism in place.
Yeah.
It all started with something many decades ago, right? Stampede Linux, which was a starting point for Slackware, and then floop, things started to fork. Nowadays, we have like, 400 Linux distributions. Of course, some of them, majority of them, like have 2 users, the creator and his girlfriend, or creator and his best friend working together. But what you see in the Linux, I think it's called Linux development tree. So this diagram that explains, you can put this in the description or some graphic link on the video. Yeah, you can link it. It's a beautiful graphics that shows that all things start with the Linux distribution, and it started to fork. There were 2 of them, there were 8 of them, 16, 34, 755. The thing is that people disagree. There's 3 of us, and one of us is Polish, which means we have 5 different opinions. I have 3 different opinions at the same time. So it's 5 of us having different disagreements. And now I can say, screw you guys, I'm going to start my own distribution. I'm going to fork the project because I believe that my way is better than yours. And the only thing that we can do from that point is start typing code. It's not the words you say, it's the code you create.
Yeah.
Now,
open source code that contribute for also to the project that you don't agree.
Yeah, and what we see in the end is the evolutionary process that basically means that if there was a fork, now imagine the parents have a child, okay, they fork. So if the offspring is not really good, it's gonna die. I know this sounds biologically horribly bad, but the idea is that if somebody tries to create a distribution that uses PowerShell instead of Bash, and they believe this is a beautiful idea, if it's a stupid idea, it's gonna die eventually.
Sure.
If the attempt to do something is good and people like it, it's like, wow, that's a pretty fresh look, look at the problem we had before. How about we try it? And then you have Linux Mint, right? So evolution is in place. That's a beautiful biological explanation of why this system is improving so fast. Because you can try, you can try first, try one path or the second path. If they don't work, they will just die out and dry out. Simple. And if you put the graphics in the link to the video, people can actually have a look at this graphics. And there's a lot of dry branches that were supposed to make a revolution, but they died out. But from there, another idea was coined. So let's try a different way, and a different way, and a different way. That's how evolution works. That's how biology works.
Exactly.
Okay? And of course, sometimes biology takes very weird turns. Like, you have those mammals that lay eggs. But still, the idea is that open source keeps on improving because people disagree, which is a wonderful thing. And the difference between open source developers and politicians is that politicians only say words without actually doing actions. And open source developers, they say words, but afterwards they roll up their sleeves and they just create the code saying, now, hold my beer, let me show you that I'm right. And the question is, can you, talk the talk and walk the walk? That's the thing. And that's beautiful about open source. I look at this ecosystem changing so dramatically over the last 20 years, and I've seen things that were really weird, really crazy, but also I've seen things which are brilliant. So we are looking at the living ecosystem. Usually when you look at the evolution, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of years.
Yeah.
We can see evolution paths happen right here, right now in real life, which is pretty awesome.
Definitely.
Yeah. So, this is a living ecosystem. And the beauty of this is that the source of truth is not somewhere in the high tower. It's here in the flea market among the people. So they say what is good or not. That's a beautiful thing about open source.
This way of thinking change the world, change our life again. Mm-hmm. It's a real point. It's a way of thinking. It's not just about code. It's about ideas. It's about curiosity. It's about evolution.
You
mentioned the point perfectly.
There's a very cool example when, open source ecosystem does not necessarily has to select the leader because it's technologically superior. We are human beings, and among human beings there are some good people and some a-holes. So you can have a brilliant a-hole. I'm going to give you 2 examples quickly. One of them is Hans Reiser. Okay, a guy who created RiserFS, a very good file system. By the time it was created, it was absolutely mind-blowing. The problem is that the guy murdered his wife.
Yeah.
Wow, this can happen. We have murders among doctors, among priests, among police officers, among every social group. So having a murderer amongst open source developers is not a big thing. And what about RiserFS? It has been abandoned because Hans Reiser was actually the only person behind the project.
That's true.
No one could actually understand how it works. That was the problem, because it was a brilliant solution with a very twisted developer. And second example, and I love it actually. A couple of years ago, we had the debate between two teams supporting iSCSI target support. So there were two implementations battling which one of them is going to be implemented in the kernel source code. So there was a let me make it clear as possible, a better one in air quotes and the worse one. One of them was better performing, had better IPI, better CLI, better features, and the other one was slightly worse. Now, guess which one of them has been selected by the kernel community to be included? Not the better one, the worse one. You know why? Because if the guy is listening to me, I'm saying that the main developer was an asshole. He was pushy, he was bossy, he was very harsh in conversations. He was not really happy to listen to any criticism. The guy created a good code, but that's not everything. You have to be a decent human person. You have to show people dignity, respect. And if you can't do that, go play in your own basement. You're not a team player anymore. And guess what? The developers decided a safer choice. They selected a maybe less performing, worse performing, slightly less featureful solution, but the developer was really willing to cooperate with everyone else. Guess what? A couple of years later, this is absolutely wonderful piece of software. It's fast, it's stable, it's reliable, it's featureful. And what about the other guy? Nobody cares. I'd say that's an evolution as well. Yeah. So we have more examples of this in open source world, just by looking at the mailing list, looking at the forums, and by basically following the open source news. We can see that things are really interesting. It's not about command line. It's not about CLI. It's not about documentation and running commands. It's also about looking at the sociological aspects of how things are being changing. That's for me, from my perspective, it's absolutely wonderful.
This is incredible focus topic and incredible way of thinking. But my question now is, how can this kind of ecosystem, this way of thinking, can be changed, can be, let me say, poisoned by something external from the open source community? And let me say that cloud, the way of the everything is going to the cloud, can be useful for a lot of things for the open source community, but for some point of view can be dangerous.
Right. So
what do you think about the evolution of open source with cloud, with everything is doing the cloud right now?
Well, taking into consideration that we are running the clouds, except for Azure, everything else is based on open source software, because AWS, even though it's closed source, it's built in open source building blocks. The same story for GCP, and the same story for IBM Cloud, which I believe is the most open source cloud actually there is. And Microsoft Azure is closed source, and Alibaba Ali Cloud is also open source by a certain degree. So without our technologies, they don't exist.
Exactly.
It's simple as that. If not for the open source software, they would never be able to build their own cloud platforms. Will they be able to sustain without us? No. Without our contribution, they will dry out eventually. So,
but let me say also, sorry for interrupting you, but there is not only a software point of view. There is no cloud without open source software, but there is no idea of cloud. The way of the cloud is now distributed, is now is based on open source ideas. It's based. There is no cloud without distribution, without the evolution of the Linux kernel. There is no cloud without the way of thinking of scaling or horizontal scaling. There is no cloud without a software-defined storage network and so on. Everything in the cloud started from an open source idea of an open source way of evolution of software.
So the cloud doesn't exist without open source software. The cloud doesn't exist without open source way of thinking. I'm pretty sure of that. And I'm going to refer to your original question. Am I afraid of open source communities being poisoned? There were attempts to divide and conquer. Okay, there were some attempts to divide and conquer, and I would say that the lamest one was with Gentoo Linux. Probably you remember many years ago, the creator of Gentoo Linux was hired by Microsoft. He wasn't hired by Microsoft to create open source software in Microsoft. No, he was there to actually break the Gentoo community. And when this happened, I can tell you from a tactician point of view, that was a very well played move, because Microsoft have taken the trusted Gentoo leader who was really respected by a lot of people. A lot of people considered him to be a visionary, which he was by the time. And when they hired him, everybody decided to put a nail in his coffin, saying, "Traitor, you betrayed us. You sold your soul for Microsoft." We don't know why he did that. We don't. He never said why he did that. Maybe he had a bank loan. Maybe he was in trouble. Maybe he's a gambler. We don't know that. For some reason, he decided to work for Microsoft. Maybe they fooled him into promise that, hey, you're going to run open source division at Microsoft. We do not know that. What we know is that Gentoo community was so badly hurt, the actual development of that distribution got poisoned so bad, a lot of people abandoned Gentoo, including myself. I'm an old Arch Linux guy, okay? I'm running Arch Linux, and I'm happy about it. But I remember that by that time when this happened, I was a Gentoo hardcore user. I was running my stage 1 on a cluster of machines. Yeah, Gentoo emerge power. So it was poisoned, and there were other attempts to poison our communities by people who with nasty intentions, by people with actual agenda to divide us. But I believe that this era is over. They tried different forces, tried many times, but it never succeeded. There was one big attempt, which I called the Gentoo fiasco, but eventually no more successful attempts were made. Now things are really transparent. Now, if you look at the development of projects like OpenShift or OpenStack or Kubernetes, you can see that there are some external powers that try to influence how things are being developed, but they can't do this in a traditional corpo behind the curtain way, because everything is transparent.
Yeah.
There are IRC sessions when people discuss things in public. There are video recordings that are, there's a web presence. There are archives of who said to something, who contributed the code. We have a perfect accountability of the source code. So now we know who contributed a particular piece of code because we have signed commits, right? So now it's very difficult. I believe the open source projects, most of them, developed a natural defense mechanisms against poison,
True.
like malicious code or code that is not trusted or code that we are not allowed to use, like with SCO Unix, remember many years ago, the SCO Unix wars and their attempted Linux kernel that failed miserably, and Lord have mercy on SCO kernel. But so no, I'm not afraid of open source project being poisoned. You would have to do it in a very, precise, well-designed way to poison a certain community. And if this were to happen, if the community managers cannot control the crowd, and people will feel that things are getting a little bit too poisonous, a new community will be created. People will basically move away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Piotr, if I have to pick a threat for the open source in this current shift to the cloud, I'm thinking about a cloud offering that is developing a certain brick of their infrastructure, like the portal or everything else, that infrastructure that maybe is 19% relying on open source. If they are developing a specific brick, they are not forced to release the source code as when they were releasing the software, they were selling the software as a product. So maybe I can see some companies, like we know, that are constantly uploading everything they are developing to GitHub and everywhere else, even if you are not really receiving the software, and so you are just using the cloud. Others, they are just saying, yes, we love open source, but this particular brick, this particular function, it's developed in-house. You will no longer see the source code. I don't know if it's a real threat, but
well, it's certainly the fact that okay, so there's a couple of different topics here. So first of all, Affero GPL, which you are referring to, one of the licenses that should allow us to trust the developers, that because Affero GPL is basically about software as a service. So right, you use it, but you never actually touch it. I mean, you don't actually have the code. It is being run on the cloud on a remote service, and you just run the result of its execution. I don't think it's doing its work pretty well. So a lot of people, a lot of companies, they use open source software behind the curtains in their software as a service solutions. They provide the services, they charge the customers, and they never contribute back to community saying, hey guys, we created this new wonderful algorithm, this or that. And it's very easy for them to do that because of the way cloud computing works. Now, is this a threat? I agree with you that this is not a threat, because maybe you remember many years ago, we had the Taliban of open source, the people following the, oh God, I'm missing the name right now. Oh God, what is the name of the open source, the Free Software Foundation creator?
Stallman, Richard Stallman.
Richard Stallman. So the Talibans of open source, the people who follow Richard Stallman's philosophy, they take no prisoners.
Yeah.
Okay. If the firmware of the wireless card is not open source, then dump it. We cannot operate like the terrorists like this. World is not gonna run the way we want it, and that's not the ultimate goal of this war. We don't want to tell everybody shut up and dance like we play the music. That's not gonna work. If you're going to enforce everybody to follow your principles, you're effectively creating a freaking church. And we know how it goes if we create churches that force people to follow them. And I'm sorry, with all my respect to Mr. Stallman, I don't think that this is the way to go. So there must be a certain compromise between software creators and people who are going to use it. We're going to have people who don't contribute back. And the only thing we should say is like, hey, guys, it would be great if you were to contribute. If you don't want to, yeah, screw you. Maybe it's going to be beneficial for you. But we should never rely on the fact that they do not contribute back. We just have to do our stuff. We have to create new software. We have to create new solutions. Keep on doing this stuff and let them use it. This relationship is never going to change. We will not start working on the solutions they created because effectively they were unable to create anything on their own. They had to use our work, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not afraid that one day, I don't know, what was this? I think it was TiVo. Yeah, the TiVo video players, right? They were closed source, and their kernel modifications were closed. And who remembers? Who even remembers what TiVo is? It's gone a long time. So this is not a threat. Every now and then, someone will not contribute source code back, and I don't think we should prosecute them. I don't think we should, fight them and try to make them contribute by using the lawful enforcement and any kind of official procedure to make them contribute back. We have to convince them to do that because they can understand. Samsung is doing that, Huawei is doing that. The worst possible open source companies like the telco, the cell phone manufacturers, they are the worst. They started contributing back, and they're doing this on their own without anyone waving a huge stick on their head. Nobody. It took 10 years, but now ZTE, Huawei, Samsung, they are all contributing back to the GitHub repos. I know that most of this stuff is crap. Okay, irrelevant crap, but still they do it, and maybe someone's going to use it. So we don't have to force everyone. Just let me rephrase it. Many years ago, somebody told me that being a leader is not about, pushing people forward and whipping them with whipping their asses. It's about being in the front, exactly. And people will follow you. That's how we should do it. We don't have to smack anybody in their, with a whip, making them do our way of thinking. We should just keep on moving and let everyone else look and follow us eventually. So don't enforce it. Just make it happen organically. That's I believe that's the way of doing it.
Evolution.
Exactly. Yeah.
Great, guys! It's an incredible talk. We are really enjoying this. Piotr, you are great. Let me say, my friend.
Oh, I'm blushing. Oh,
no, it's true. But I wanna have a talk like this with you in real life, with a beer or a coffee, depend of the time in the morning.
Why or? We can have both.
Yes, but not at the same time, please.
Oh, come on. Keep your options open.
Yeah. Okay. Piotr, thank you very much. It's 1 hour more or less, and our Geek Talk is usually this kind of timing. And I want to ask you to have you here again for another talk in the future. Will be definitely better in front of a beer, in real life, in front of a beer, talking, chatting about nerd stuff. But I think that will not possible in a few months, and maybe again in virtually, like with this kind of instruments. But
I'll be more than happy to sit with all three of us sitting on the couch,
exactly.
With the camera in front, sipping beers or coffee or having a snack and having a friendly conversation.
Or at least I'm missing open source events. Missing
me
open
too,
source
definitely.
Events.
But so just get vaccinated. Make sure that everyone else gets vaccinated. Yeah, and spread the word that we need the freaking vaccinations. So eventually, hopefully in a couple of months, we will get back to the regular program where we can meet real people and touch them.
Exactly.
And enjoy
and hugging us, let me say, just a huge hug. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Piotr, grazie mille. Thank you very much indeed.
Prego.
It was a real pleasure to have you here, and
Thank you
talk
very
to
much
you
for having
soon,
me.
my friend.
Yeah. Take care, guys. Thank you very much for this opportunity to talk to you. Take care,
See
everybody.
you. Ciao.
Take care. Ciao.